Okay, so here we are. I've entitled this one, Free in Jerusalem, Bound in Caesarea, and On to Rome. So let's see where Saul is. I always like doing a bit of review to have some continuity. And last time we were in Acts, oops, what happened there? Last time we were in Acts chapter 20, and we were heading towards Jerusalem. Of course, we had arrived. Paul was with a group of people from various churches, as you see there, Sopater of Berea, a couple from Thessalonica, Gaius and Timotheus of Derbe. And from Asia, I just highlighted them because one of them got in trouble, and they are mentioned throughout Paul's letters. Tychicus, who's mentioned in a few letters, and Trophimus. And I'm just going to read 2 Timothy 4:20 for a second, just to let you know. This is Paul's last epistle. And he says in 2 Timothy 4:20, Erastus abode at Corinth, but Trophimus have I left at Miletum sick. So just shows that Trophimus is there all the way to the last epistle of Paul, Trophimus. We'll hear more from him. Of course, Luke was picked up at Philippi, as we mentioned, and they were all going to bring an offering to the poor saints at Jerusalem. And just to remind you of the geography, here, let's see, here. We were starting in Ephesus, right around here, and Paul spent 3 months in Corinth, which is way down here in southern Greece, and then he decided he wanted to go to Spain via Rome, but also via Jerusalem, which means he'd have to turn around, go all the way back before he goes all the way west. So what happens is he writes the letter of Romans in Romans chapter 20, verse 3, gives the letter to Phoebe, who is in the church in Cenchrea over here. And then he heads on his way up and over. He meets the elders, as we saw last week, at the port closest to Ephesus called Miletus, which is where he's leaving Trophimus sick in 2 Timothy. And then they continued on and arrived in Jerusalem, as you remember, of course. And when they hit the coast, they landed in Tyre, Ptolemais, and Caesarea, which was a major Roman port. And then they went up to Jerusalem. So this is what we saw last time. And we made some observations. I just want to remind you, because we're getting towards the end of Acts, and Acts, as I'm discovering through this study, is very Jewish. It concentrates on the prophetic message, what was promised, the kingdom. And even though we see Paul given a new ministry, we don't hear much about it. We hear about the impact and on Israel, on the calling to Israel, and you know, it's called, rightly so, the fall of Israel. Basically, the prophetic message or prophetic calling being postponed while the dispensation of grace comes into full effect. But the Acts we're seeing it diminishing, and so we don't hear anything about the gospel of grace, except pretty well at one point where Paul talks about his ministry of the gospel of the grace of God when he meets the Ephesian elders. What's highlighted through this is what I brought out, his lengthy preaching when someone fell asleep and fell from the third loft, and then a lot of his suffering, and we see that all throughout. But there's a prophesied suffering of what's going to happen in Jerusalem when he gets there. So all that is highlighted, not details of the gospel of grace. So I concluded last time, you're not going to get the gospel of grace in the book of Acts. You got to go and read Romans and read Paul's letters, rightly divided and understanding who it's being written to and why. So there's a lot more to it as we go forward.
You know, I think Phil, a lot of folks get thrown by reading the words grace, where Paul says, or someone says, go with grace, or grace be with you, or something of that nature, that those words constitute a change in dispensation, or actually not a change in the dispensation, that they are in grace. But I think we've seen that just because we see the word go with grace, or that grace be taught to them, doesn't mean that constitutes a change in the relationship with God.
Yeah, because we've heard it said that, well, you're saved by grace from Genesis to Revelation. I mean, you don't deserve anything. I mean, that's taking the word grace for its pure meaning.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. But the dispensation of grace is what we're imposing.
Yeah.
And it's easily imposed, since Paul had the ministry. So we're looking for it. We're trying to impose it.
Yes.
And that is the danger of any Bible study. And like I remember Pastor Lauren saying, premillennial, give me a second, what's the term? Premillennial, I can't remember. Premillennial, like having a premillennial view is like it's a bias. Like it is the way you're going to read.
Oh, yes.
Pre-trib, pre-trib rapture.
Uh-huh.
That's really declaring a bias in your study.
And yes, that's true. And it colors everything. So if somebody reads the word grace, they say, oh, well, you see, it's grace. And not necessarily, because, we before have seen that the grace that happened in the past was found grace.
Yes.
So individuals found grace, but it wasn't the grace that had appeared to all men, which Paul declares.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always good to keep in mind. Yeah. And the grace is justification by faith alone in the blood of Christ alone, right?
Yes.
That's grace. That's the message of grace in the dispensation of grace. So yeah, let's not overlook into it. So that's good. So that's the kind of thing I was seeing, and that's why I made these observations when we finished last week's study. So what else? Next. Oh, another thing I noticed, I just want to identify. Paul left cities in an uproar wherever he went. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. It is, in a sense, a study of Paul, listening to his words, how he presents, and the result is uproar. Before he was saved, he put Jerusalem in an uproar to, look for the church of God and persecute them, chase them. After he was converted, when he went back to Jerusalem, he caused an uproar and had to leave and be sent back to Tarsus. He had to escape over a wall in Damascus because they were after him, even the authorities. He was expelled from Antioch of Pisidia, if you remember. Stoned to death in Lystra. In Philippi, he had met some people, started a church, but he was beaten, jailed, and said, "You got to go," because the place was. He just couldn't stay. Thessalonica, the city was in uproar. Ephesus, the silversmiths finally, after 3 years, were in an uproar. And then what we're going to see tonight is Jerusalem in an uproar. So it's predictable. So I'm wondering, to save my voice, if I can start with Vivian. Okay. If you could read chapter 21, verses 17 to 32.
Okay.
And we'll share this. There is a lot of reading tonight, but I think it'll just give us the picture.
Okay. Thank you. Acts chapter 21, starting at verse 17. And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly, And the day following, Paul went with us unto James, and all the elders were present. And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are amongst the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. What is it, therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. Do therefore this that we say unto thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Take them and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou keepest thyself, that thou thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. As touching the Gentiles which believe, we've written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up the people and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help! This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, and hath polluted this holy place. For they had seen before with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. And as they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar, who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. And when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beating off Paul.
Great, thank you, Vivian. There. So I was going to say poor Trophimus, but I guess Paul was getting a beating. So where did Paul go? Well, okay, he went to Jerusalem and was staying with Nason of Cyprus, a disciple. We saw that earlier. He went to James' place, or he met with James, I'm not sure where. He was in the temple and he was in the city. That's what we glean from the reading. Whom did he meet? Well, he met James and all the elders of the Jerusalem church. He met 4 men with a vow in particular. Question is, are they believers in Jesus? I believe they're believers in Jesus of Nazareth, yes. Jews which were of Asia. I'm not sure if they were believers in Jesus. All the city, the people, Jews mainly, I think. These extra statements are mine. The chief captain, which we later find out his name is Claudius Lysias, and a whole bunch of Roman soldiers, centurions. How long was he there? Well, I think it was a day and overnight with James, and maybe 7 days. It sounded like he had done the 7 days of purification, or almost. So it was about a week or so. So what did he say or preach? So I'm just breaking it out because there wasn't any kind of preaching going on here, but he taught, what did he say? He mentioned his ministry to the Gentiles with particulars. to James and the elders, but the reader doesn't really get informed what those particulars are. That's all that's stated. As you can see, very scant details about the Gentile ministry to the Gentiles. Then there's a discussion about the Jews among the Gentiles. And it's stated that the Jews in Jerusalem think, and this is my interpretation, the Jews in Jerusalem think Paul teaches the Jews among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, not to circumcise, nor to walk after the customs, regardless of who Jesus is. And I put that in there, meaning are these people believers in Jesus or not? It's not stated. This is just what's implied. He's teaching, the Jews among the Gentiles to forsake all this. And the advice then is to take a vow, advice to Paul from James, and show the impression that this impression of what Paul is teaching them is nothing. Because Paul actually walks orderly, which probably means keeping the customs, and keeps the law. And any Gentiles that believe, they have an ordinance that was given to them in Acts 15, which James reiterates. So Paul isn't teaching Jews who don't believe in Jesus to forsake Moses, but Gentiles which believe, they have an ordinance. So there's some order there. And Jews among the Gentiles, Paul isn't necessarily teaching them to forsake Moses. So it's quite ambiguous, this conversation with James. His vow to the local Jews in Jerusalem was almost completed except for an offering. So he was being orderly and showing how he kept the law when he was in Judah, in Jerusalem. So it looks like only the Gentiles, which would be Jews who don't practice, so Gentiles who aren't Jews outside the territory, and Gentiles who are, I guess, ethnic Gentiles. They can do what they want. It didn't really matter.
Yeah, there is likely some twisting of what Paul said that's being used against him by the false brethren. Where Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7, is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Is any called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing. So all those words could have been easily twisted and used against him and then faulted him.
Yeah, because there's many categories of those called, right?
Yeah.
And we're starting to see that. And so, yeah, it can be twisted. So, because in Jerusalem, there are the Jews who believe in Jesus and then Jews who don't see Jesus as the Messiah.
Yeah.
And it looks like James has a peace treaty with Judaism, right? He's like a sect. They believe somebody was the Messiah. As long as they're not, breaking the law, they seem to have a bit of a harmony, as opposed to when Paul was hanging around before he was converted.
That charge against them, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that charge that was made against him, if we turn to forsake Moses, if we turn to Acts 13:39, or 38 and 39, when he's still in the synagogue, he's saying, "Be it known unto you, therefore, men and brethren," and he's speaking to the ones in the synagogue, "that through this man is preached unto you the forgiveness of sins, and by him all that believe are justified from all things from which ye could not be justified by the law of Moses."
That's the kingdom, but that is a kingdom gospel, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
But
have to
that's where
believe.
where we see them twisting the charges to put it against Paul.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's all these things that he said that could be twisted and used against him.
So, yeah, the question is who are the local Jews? Sorry about that. The local Jews in Jerusalem, there's that mix, those that believe and those that don't. I guess they want to twist Paul and find any fault with them, especially the Asian Jews.
Mm,
Right? I mean, the Asian Jews know what he's doing.
yeah.
They don't like it.
Yeah, they were the ones who heard Paul's teaching.
Yes. And they accuse him, as you can see in that point, the accusation that all men everywhere, not Jews among the Gentiles or Jews have that calling, but all men everywhere against the law, against the people, and against the temple, which is not true. So that's where the Asian Jews, they're not Messianic Jews at all. They were out to get Paul, and they saw him walking around with Trophimus in the city, and they accused him of bringing him into the temple, and they wanted to kill him. So it wasn't just, they're mad at it. Like it was mortal. It was blasphemy, right? They wanted to kill him, and they were wanting to kill him legally under Mosaic law.
Yeah.
So yeah, this needs more study too to really place it. But this is really a confusing part because of what James says and who is he talking about? Yeah, is it false? Because he's telling Paul to show that he keeps the law. That this is nothing, this impression is wrong. As opposed to, anyway, I think I've belabored it. He does follow Jesus, the Messiah, which is all a strike against him.
Yeah.
So next time, now we're going to go to another reading. So this was when Paul was free in Jerusalem. Now we're going to go where he's going to be bound in Jerusalem. So Brother Van, can I get you to read this part? There's about 3 slides of readings, but we can split it up.
Okay.
So it's Acts 21:33 to 21:40.
21:33 to 20.
Well,
to the end of the chapter. Okay.
Yeah, and then I want to read the next chapter. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So Acts 21, starting at verse 33. Then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done. And some cried one thing, some another, among the multitude. And when he could not know for certainty for the tumult, he commanded him to be carried into the castle. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was borne of the soldiers for the violence of the people, for the multitude of the people followed after, crying, "Away with him." And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, "May I speak unto thee?" Who said, "Canst thou speak Greek? Art not thou that Egyptian, which before these days madest an uproar and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers?" But Paul said, "I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people." And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying,
I need if you could continue reading, Brother Van.
Okay.
Till let's say verse 16, and I'll get
All right.
something else to continue after that.
Okay. So he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. And when they had heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. And he saith, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God. And ye all are, as ye all are this day. And I persuaded this way, I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prison both men and women. And also the high priest doth bear me witness, and all the estate of the elders, from whom also I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were there bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. And it came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. And I fell unto the ground and heard a voice say unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And when they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, Arise, go into Damascus, and there it shall be told thee of all things which are appointed for thee to do. And when I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelt there, came unto me and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked up upon him, and he said, The God of our fathers hath chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will and see that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen, both seen and heard. And now, why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized, wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord.
Okay, thank you, Brother Van. Can I get Lucia, is she there? To read,
Yes, I'm here.
yes, could you read till, let's see, 22? Yeah, just
24.
continue from verse 17 to,
Okay.
I'm sorry, till
24.
till the end of the chapter.
Okay. And it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him saying unto me, Make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by and consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. And he said unto me, Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. And they gave him audience unto this word, and then lifted up their voices and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. And as they cried out and cast off their clothes and threw dust into the air, the chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle, and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? When the centurion heard that, he went and told the chief captain, saying, take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. Then the chief captain came and said unto him, tell me, art thou a Roman? He said, yea. And the chief captain answered, with a great sum I obtained this freedom. And Paul said, but I was free born. Then straightway they departed from him which should have examined him. And the chief captain also was afraid after he knew that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. On the morrow, because he would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews, he loosed him from his bands and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them.
And if you could continue, Lucy, into chapter 23.
Okay. Till
One.
verse 15.
Yeah.
Verse 15?
Yes.
Okay. And Paul, earnestly beholding the council, said, men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood him to smite him on the mouth. Then said Paul unto him, God shall smite thee, thou white wall. For sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law? And they that stood by said, revilest thou God's high priest? Then said Paul, I wist not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. But when Paul perceived that the one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope and resurrection of the dead I am called in question. And when he had so said, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. And there arose a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees part arose and strove, saying, we find no evil in this man. But if a spirit or an angel had spoken to him, let us not fight against God. And when there arose great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force among them, and to bring him into the castle. And the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, be of good cheer, Paul. For as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, we have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore, ye with the council signified to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though he would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him.
Thank you, Lucia. I'll read the last part. So we have Paul bound in the castle. He was before the Sanhedrin. He put the Sanhedrin in an uproar. They took him back, and now there's this conspiracy to kill Paul when they can get to him. So let me continue reading from 16 to verse 30. And when Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. Then the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately and asked him, what is that thou hast to tell me? He said, the Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldst bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him, and now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart and charged him, see thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things to me. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide them beasts, that they may set Paul on and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter after this manner: Claudius Lysias unto the most excellent governor Felix sendeth greeting. This man was taken of the Jews and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. And when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth into their council, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds. And when it was told me how that the Jews laid wait for the man, I sent straightway to thee, and gave commandment to his accusers also, to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell. So a lot of drama, and let's answer some questions here. Where did Paul go? Well, he ended up going to the Roman fortress that's adjacent to the temple in Jerusalem, the castle, as it's referred to. He also was taken down and went and met the Jewish council, or the Sanhedrin, to go with questioning. Whom did he meet? Well, he met Roman military personnel, the Sanhedrin, which is comprised of Pharisees and Sadducees.
No, estoy oyendo.
Pardon me?
Continue, Phil, it's okay.
Okay. Paul mentioned that some knew of him 25 years on now. He mentioned that they knew who Paul was. There's no secret. They hadn't forgotten that he was a persecutor. He had papers from the Sanhedrin to go and kill, arrest believers in the way. So they knew him. We also meet Paul's sister's son. So there's a lot of family here. So Paul's nephew. And he stayed, I think, a day where he met the Sanhedrin. And I think there were 2 days in jail under protective custody, if you sort of read through it. So there's, not much time. It's happening pretty quickly. And so let's look at what was said. So we don't get a lot of doctrine here. We see Paul's credentials more than anything. He displays his linguistic skills. Those are brought out. His Greek to the captain, Hebrew to the people. He partially provided his credentials to the captain at the beginning. And he gave his testimony to the crowd, who are the people, as he was being led out of the temple. He reiterated, he persecuted the way viciously. He met Jesus of Nazareth, who he considers the Messiah. He said it very clearly. There were miracles, so signs and wonders, restoring his sight. He was baptized, and he had a direct calling to the Gentiles. So this is Paul, this is what he's saying. The minute the word Gentiles comes out, the crowd goes wild. As you can see, there's this real bias to those non-believing Jews. Don't believe Gentiles should be involved in anything, any calling from God. and there was some new information. He claimed his Roman citizenship finally. And so we see trial number 1, where Paul definitely displays his knowledge of the law, and that they were being the Sanhedrin was being contrary by smiting him for speaking. And he wisely split the council by declaring the resurrection of the dead and the hope that he had, which was his doctrine. And that just ended things. And so the Sanhedrin was in an uproar. So we go on to Caesarea. How are we doing for time?
We're fine.
Okay. So yeah, trial number 1, and he ends up getting about 5 trials. Okay, well, let's see if we can do Caesarea. So we're not doing a lot of reading, just a little excerpt after this, because there's a lot in there. I encourage you to read the next 2.5 chapters. But where did Paul go? They took him with cavalry and infantry. They took him to Antipatris along the way, and then they took him to Caesarea. So that was from Jerusalem to the coast, where there's another strong Roman fortress and settlement. So he must have met the soldiers and horsemen. And in this time, he also met Felix the governor, who the letter was written from the chief captain to Felix. We met Drusilla, his Jewish wife. And then there was another trial where Ananias, the high priest, Jewish elders, and some great, orator went to present before the governor. So it was quite a formal affair. We hear about a centurion who guarded Paul. And then during this time, and this was a long period, it was about 2 years that he was under house arrest in Caesarea, Paul's acquaintances were free to visit him at Caesarea, and they weren't named. That was just a statement. His acquaintances were free to visit him. Then they were there long enough for the governor to be replaced by another named Porcius Festus and his council, who heard Paul. And then at the end of this 2-year period, King Agrippa came to visit the new governor, King Agrippa II, who was the son of Herod, that was mentioned in Acts 12:1, where Herod persecuted and killed James, the brother of John. And this King Agrippa was also the grandson of Herod the Great, who was time of Jesus's birth. And King Agrippa was married to Bernice, who was, Bernice was his sister. I guess they hung out together. So King Agrippa and Bernice came to visit. And Bernice
it was an illicit relationship,
no, yeah, it wasn't the wife. I didn't get into it, but anyway, Bernice, I think, was either Jewish or very aware. They're all quite aware. Agrippa would be an Edomite, and if he was the king, he would know a lot about Jewish affairs. He would have known about Paul, Jesus, rebels, and all the ins and outs of the court. So in this time period, we see there was a day to Antipatris and another day to Caesarea. 5 days before there was this trial number 2. And then there were certain days before Felix and Drusilla heard Paul. And then it went on for 2 years. Felix was hoping to get a few bribes along the way and keep the Jews happy while he kept Paul under house arrest. But Paul, being a Roman, there was really not a lot to do, Jewishly anyway. So what has come out in this reading? We hear baseless accusations that cannot be proven. So Paul was very clear. He had a very clear legal mind, and he knew they could not prove what was said against him, that Trophimus was not in the temple or that he was teaching Jews the wrong thing. Paul felt very clean legally, legalistically as a Jew, and legally. That's the feeling you get from what he says before Felix, before Festus, before Agrippa, and before the council. He didn't preach heresy. He based his doctrine on scripture, and he's appealing to the Jewish, the knowledge that the governors and the king had about Jewish affairs. So he was basing it on the Old Testament. And resurrection of the dead was a key issue. It's in the Old Testament. Paul made a point. He had a good conscience before God. And he was, I don't know if that's the right word, slapped back in Jerusalem for saying this. Yeah, that's what he was slapped when he said that before the high priest. Remember, he said, you're holding me, you're breaking the law. You're accusing me by the law, and then you're breaking it. And he got slapped for saying it because he has a good conscience before God and toward men. Paul is very clear about that. He says the resurrection appeared to the just, applies to the just and the unjust. And that made Felix tremble a little bit. And because while he was giving his testimony, the word of God couldn't help but convict those who had any idea of the message and the ministry of the Jewish nation. He talked about righteousness, temperance, and judgment to come. Felix trembled at that. And Paul is very clear, he has not offended Jewish law, the temple, nor Caesar. So he's very clear about his innocence, his good conscience, put it that way. And he finally, I guess he sees, by when Jesus appeared to him and said, you're going to represent me in Rome, he felt very free to appeal to Caesar after the 2 years when he finally met King Agrippa. Or he had appealed to Caesar before that, but that's he had to go to Caesar since he hadn't relented and the Jewish council hadn't relented. So Paul appeals to Caesar, and he affirmed Jesus to be alive. And,
So Phil,
yeah,
Felix is a Roman governor, correct?
yeah, but his wife is Jewish.
No, that's
Drusilla.
Drusilla. Okay. Yes, okay.
Verse 24, chapter 24, verse 24.
Yes, his wife is Jewish. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
He himself is a Roman.
Pardon, yes.
Agrippa, of course, would be a Jewish puppet king.
Yeah, so he would have been an Edomite.
Yes.
Edomian, yeah. So he would have been a false Jew, even to the Jews. So to Agrippa, Paul also said many things. This is right at the end. There were more credentials. He said he was a strict Pharisee because Agrippa was very aware of Jewish things. So he was known by the Jews as a strict Pharisee. Paul, is very clear. He's not some secret rebel guy, unknown. He was accused against the hope he finds in the Old Testament, in the law and the prophets. He believes in the raising of the dead. He talks about the raising of the dead. Jesus rose from the dead. He persecuted Jesus, but by a miracle vision, he encountered Jesus himself, who called him to bring light, forgiveness of sins to the people, that's Israel, and the Gentiles. And Paul could not disobey the vision. So I wanted to end by reading just a few verses, and that'll bring us to the conclusion. So if I can, Karen, do you want to do this? Chapter 26 of Acts, verses 19 to 32. Just gives us a really clear flavor of Paul's message. Acts 26, verses 19 to 32, in a loud voice without blocking. There you go.
Whereupon, O King Agrippa, I was not disobedient unto the heavenly vision, but showed first unto them at Damascus and, and at and at Jerusalem and throughout all the coasts of Judea, and then to the Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God and do works meet for repentance. For these causes the Jews caught me in the temple and went about to kill me. Having therefore obtained help of God, I continue unto this day, witnessing both to small and great, saying none other things than those which the prophets and Moses did say should come, that Christ should suffer, and that he should be the first that should rise from the dead, and should show light unto the people and to the Gentiles. And as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad. But he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. For the king knoweth of these things, before whom also I speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And Paul said, I would to God that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day, were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds. And when he had thus spoken, the king rose up, and the governor and Bernice, and they that sat with them. And when they were gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, this man doeth nothing worthy of death or of bonds. Then said Agrippa unto Festus, this man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed unto Caesar.
And with that, let's just end with a couple of points. I'm just reiterating them. The gospel of the grace of God is stated earlier in Acts. His lengthy preaching is mentioned. His prophesied suffering is highlighted. And here we see the resurrection of the dead in a clearer way in 1 Corinthians, but he talks about the resurrection of the dead among different churches, Jews in Jerusalem, Jews among Gentiles, and Gentiles. So that's where I leave it in Caesarea, and then it's on to Rome next time. But we don't see full preaching, full exposition. We just see Paul talking about resurrection of the dead, the prophets, what was promised, and that Jesus rose from the dead. Like that's enough for his audience at this point. So I'm going to leave it there. Any questions, comments, things you want to say? Or... I'm going to stop sharing. There, we are back.
No, he does say to Agrippa, he says, do you believe the prophets? I know you believe the prophets.
Yes.
So not going to find the gospel of grace preached by the prophets.
Exactly. But he was pretty aggressive. He freely talked to the king, didn't submit, he spoke freely and boldly. And it's all in the prophets. So it isn't the grace message, because that's but now, that's new. So anyway, any questions, Lucy?
Do you think Paul didn't mention like the grace message to them because they were Jews and it just didn't fit to the circumstance in which he was in? Maybe because of the audience he had?
Well, I think it's because of the audience. They were Jewish and they knew. So they're in Judah too. They're in Judea. So I think I don't think he would have wanted them to convert to the law or anything like that. But the message is believe that Jesus rose from the dead, right? And that he's bringing you forgiveness of sins. Now, he didn't talk about Jesus dying, right? He didn't talk about the death of Jesus.
I know, I think
that is the message of grace, isn't it?
right. The issue being that the gospel of Christ, well, the gospel of God is that Jesus is the Christ. And then the gospel of God, or the good news of God, I'm sorry, the good news of Christ is that he is raised from the dead, that he can come back and bring them the kingdom. And so all those then that would accept him as their Christ, and when he returns, then that is salvation. So it's different than what we, the body over which Christ is head, we need the death, burial, and resurrection for salvation. They just needed to believe that Jesus was the Christ and to welcome him back as the Messiah. That would be salvation. Go into the kingdom. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, we are not hearing Paul preach the gospel of grace.
Yeah.
The kind of principles we read in Romans, justification by faith alone, or we're saved by grace through faith. We're not hearing that at all, not to these people. It's not documented by Luke in what we're reading.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't look into that and say, well, is there a grace message coming out? Is there something? No, he isn't to these people.
Yeah.
No,
it's believe that Jesus is the Christ, and salvation then is believing that he's the Christ.
And in Acts 26, verse 20, he's talking about his ministry. He showed first unto them of Damascus, and at Jerusalem, and throughout all the coasts of Judea, and then to the Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God and do works meet for repentance.
Works.
So
works.
So these Gentiles had to do works meet for repentance, whoever these Gentiles were.
Mm-hmm.
Because that sounds like Peter's message to Cornelius. Yeah.
Well, he wasn't, Cornelius wasn't asked to do anything. Well, yes, they had a baptism.
I'm thinking of the message where it says in Acts 10:35, it says, but in every nation, this is Peter preaching to Cornelius in the household, in every nation, he that feareth him, it's God, and worketh righteousness is accepted with him.
Oh, yes.
Right? So he's talking about working righteousness. So it's pretty clear we're not going to get in the book of Acts, Lucy, we're not going to get the grace gospel in any way, even if it has been said on the side to Gentiles somewhere else. What's documented here is, it looks like to me, the kingdom gospel to those who are hearing it. It's because the book of Acts is about the fall of Israel. It's taking the Old Testament to a conclusion for now and giving us the gospel of grace. Because the next book after it is a Gentile named book. It's called Romans. It's like, what? It should be called,
Hebrews,
Esther, the book of Daniel, David, anything but Romans, because that's a Gentile word. So you're coming along from Genesis all the way through, and then bang, you're hit with the word Romans. And that's where it begins, the grace begins. And it begins in a different way than I think we've thought in the past, because the workers who are bringing the gospel of grace are Jews saved in the Jewish program and have a calling and are chosen. And it's a shift, and Paul's bringing a shift that people aren't expecting. It's a shift that is anathema unless you believe in Jesus as your Messiah. So with that, I conclude.
All right, you stop the video.
Okay. So next time.